The first sensation wasn't a sound, but a searing, agonizing burn that split my chest open. Then came the piercing electronic scream of a monitor, a long, flat line of noise that clawed its way into my consciousness. My body convulsed, a puppet on invisible strings, and then, just as suddenly, stilled. For a moment, a merciful, dreamlike haze settled over me, a silent, empty space. I thought I had slipped away, but the cheap fluorescent lights above, buzzing with a persistent insect-like hum, pulled me back. The taste in my mouth was dry and metallic, like old paper. My throat, raw and unyielding, refused to swallow. My vision, a dizzying kaleidoscope of color, blurred in and out until a man's face finally came into focus. A name tag over his breast pocket read Marcus. His eyes, gentle and full of a worried kindness, told me the truth before his voice ever did. "You're safe, Mrs. Croft. Just rest now." Safe. The word felt like a hollow lie, a foreign language I couldn't comprehend. It clung to me, an echo I didn't believe. My chest felt as if it had been split open, the muscles and sinews protesting with every shallow breath. My mind, a frantic, desperate thing, searched for something solid to hold onto, a name, a face, a memory, something to anchor me to the world I had so nearly left behind. One name floated to the surface first: Charlotte, my daughter. Then another: Ethan, my son. My lips, cracked and dry as a desert floor, managed a raspy whisper. "Where are they?" Marcus hesitated, his gentle face softening with a pity I didn't want. He shook his head softly, a silent warning. "Don't strain yourself." He adjusted my blanket, his touch professionally impersonal. But that night, after the shift changed and the ward quieted into a low thrum of machines and hushed whispers, I heard him talking near my bed. My eyes were closed, my body still, but my mind was wide awake. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. "Yes, ma'am." She stabilized. "Yes. No. She's conscious now. Would you like to speak to her?" A long, agonizing pause stretched between Marcus's words and the response from the other end. "Okay. Got it. Just thought you'd want to know." His voice fell silent, but the words lingered, chilling me to the bone. "Would you like to speak to her?" And whoever was on the other end, my daughter, had said no. The truth of that single word was more potent than any poison. I lay there, blinking at the ceiling, my heartbeat hammering harder and faster than when the stroke had hit. My own children knew I was alive, clinging to life by a thread, and they chose silence. They chose to say no. The next morning, when a different nurse tidied the table by my bed, a piece of lined paper, left casually under my water cup, caught my eye. My hand trembled as I pulled it closer. The note was folded, creased, and written with a haste that felt like a slap. "Gone for 10 days. Hope you are better when we return. C and E." That was it. No flowers, no phone numbers, no promises to come back. Just a note, like you'd leave on a fridge before heading to the beach. Tears didn't come, not then. Instead, a numbness settled over me, thicker than any morphine drip. I realized in that instant that the people I had carried through the storms of their childhoods had boarded a plane to sunshine while I clung to life by a thread. The ICU hummed with machines, but to me, it was only silence. Silence, louder than any betrayal I could imagine. And I knew if I survived this, it would change everything. 9 days later, when they finally wheeled me out of the ICU, with a discharge packet and a paper bag of medications, the only one waiting to sign me out was a hospital volunteer. Not Charlotte, not Ethan, just a stranger who smiled politely and asked if I wanted help into the transport van. The ride back to San Antonio was quiet, the driver fiddling with the radio while I stared at the window, watching the familiar landscape pass by like a film. I braced myself to feel at home again, but when the van stopped in front of my house, something in my gut clenched. The curtains in the living room were different, a strange shade of ochre I would never choose. The front porch chairs, the ones my husband Arthur and I had sat in for so many summer evenings, were gone. I reached for the ceramic frog planter by the steps, the one that always held a spare key, and found it empty. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I knocked, a series of frantic raps on the door, but no one answered. After 15 minutes of fumbling, a car pulled into the driveway. My son-in-law, Alex, stepped out, holding a Starbucks cup like he had been caught trespassing. "Oh, Mrs. Croft," he stammered, his eyes darting past me, searching for an escape. "You're home sooner than we thought." The words were a knife in the gut. They weren't expecting me. They thought I would still be a ghost in a hospital bed. I didn't answer. I just pushed past him, each step heavier than the last, and stepped inside. The air was thick with the smell of fresh paint and something else, something sterile and foreign. The living room didn't look like mine anymore. Furniture had been rearranged. The walls, half painted a color I would never have chosen, felt like a desecration. My wedding photos, once proudly displayed on the mantel, were gone, shoved into a cardboard box near the corner. I ran my hand over the dusty top of the box, feeling a wave of nausea. On the dining table, a glossy flyer lay spread open. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The words on the page were like a final, brutal blow. Charming Southern home, ideal for young families. It was my house, my home of 27 years, listed for sale. I sank into a chair, my legs refusing to hold me. My eyes shifted to a manila folder spread open on the counter. Inside were copies of legal documents, a power of attorney. My signature scrolled across the bottom. The date was 3 years earlier, when I'd been recovering from hip surgery. Charlotte had insisted it was just insurance paperwork, something harmless to sign while I drifted in and out of anesthesia. And now here it was, resurrected as a weapon, a declaration of war, a testament to a betrayal so complete I could barely comprehend it. My house, my life, had already been stripped down to a line of marketing copy. Charming Southern home, ideal for young families, a phrase that erased me completely. My chest ached, not from the stroke, but from the crushing realization that the people I had carried and loved had orchestrated this plan while I fought for my life. My hands shook as I reached for the last lifeline, an old iPad Ethan used to leave on the pantry shelf. He had left it behind, a forgotten relic. By some miracle, it still had a charge. The screen lit up, and his messages, careless and cold, spilled into view. The date was a day before my stroke. Charlotte, once Mom's house sells, will finally have breathing room. I reread the words, the casual cruelty of them, a fresh wound. Breathing room? From what? From me? The woman who worked double shifts after their father died so they could finish school? The one who loaned them money when Alex's business collapsed? Then, Ethan's reply appeared on the screen. A new kind of terror. Yeah, assisted living is all lined up. Rosewood Manor is a great place. And it's locked down for her own good. No more boundaries. About time. My heart, already fragile from the stroke, felt as if it had been shattered all over again. They didn't just want my house. They wanted me gone. Locked away. The words "locked down for her own good" echoed in my mind. They weren't planning to move me somewhere nice. They were planning to imprison me. They were preparing to erase me. I sank into the chair, the cold reality of their plan settling over me. They weren't just being careless or thoughtless. This was premeditated, a calculated act of cruelty. I looked at the legal documents on the counter, the for sale flyer on the table, and the messages on the screen. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a horrifying picture. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't bad timing. This was a plan. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table under the dim glow of a single bulb, staring at the flyer like it was a death notice. My house, my life, had already been stripped down to a line of marketing copy. Charming Southern home, ideal for young families, a phrase that had erased me completely. My mind, a frantic, desperate thing, went back to the messages on the iPad. They were planning to move me to a place where I couldn't leave, where they wouldn't have to deal with me anymore, where they would have breathing room. From me, the weight of that thought was heavier than any physical pain. By dawn, I had decided. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to fight. I remembered a name, a boy I had taught years ago who loved poetry and the power of words. Mateo Espinoza. He had been one of my English students, a quiet boy who now had his own small firm on the west side of San Antonio. I called his office, and when he answered, I said, "Mateo, this is Beatrice Croft. Do you remember me?" He hesitated, then his voice warmed. "Mrs. Croft, of course. You taught me to write. What's wrong?" I told him everything. My voice shook as I described the power of attorney, the for sale flyer, the messages I wasn't supposed to see. He listened quietly. No interruptions, no disbelief. When I finished, he said, "You're not the first, but we can stop this." Mateo's office was modest, just a second-floor suite, above a bustling taqueria that filled the air with the smell of fried tortillas and grilled meat. But the moment he flipped through the documents I brought, his calm smile sharpened into something fierce and determined. He didn't question me, didn't doubt my story for a moment. He just went to work, his fingers flying across the page as he identified the legal flaws in the document. "They overreached," he said, his voice low and confident. This version of the POA is fatally flawed. It doesn't explicitly authorize real estate transfers, and they signed it under duress while you were under anesthesia. They can't sell your home. Not legally. We can not only stop this, we can flip it on them. Relief flooded me so fast it made me dizzy. For the first time since my heart had stopped, I felt the ground under my feet again. Mateo filed a petition that same afternoon to rescind the power of attorney and reinstate my full autonomy. He promised to fast-track it. We'll get an injunction, a restraining order if we have to. If we move now, you can flip this on them before they even know what happened. You'll be in control again. That evening, I walked through the empty rooms of my house one last time. The indent in the carpet where the old couch used to be. The faint outline of a Christmas tree stand, still pressed into the floorboards from last December. Shadows of a life that no longer belonged here. This house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a mausoleum. I pulled a shoebox from the pantry, the one that held my emergency cash. Then a worn notebook where I had scribbled passwords since the 92nd. They thought I would be powerless, a woman with no access to funds, no legal standing. They forgot who raised them. They forgot who taught them to write, to think, to plan. When the sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows across the living room floor, I changed the locks on the doors. I pulled out the old spare key, the one from my purse, and with a quiet, decisive click, I sealed the house off. I was no longer a victim waiting to be discovered. I was a force of nature. Alex showed up an hour later, rattling the knob, then frantically trying to open the lock with his own key. He didn't have a new one. I watched him through the Ring camera, a modern spy, and his face was a mix of confusion and panic. I held my phone up to the camera and said, my voice steady and cold, "Take your tools and leave, Alex, before I call the police, and donate them to a good cause." He stared at me for a moment, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He said nothing. He just picked up his tools and walked away, his shoulders hunched. In that silence, I realized something sharper than betrayal. I wasn't just their mother anymore. I was their mark. A commodity to be sold, a problem to be solved. And now, I was a ghost they couldn't control. Mateo worked quickly. Within 3 days, the court had rescinded the power of attorney and restored my full control. A final, definitive legal document had been delivered to my home, a confirmation that I was no longer an object to be sold. By then, I already knew what I had to do. Staying in that house meant waiting to be cornered again, waiting for them to find another way to push me out. No, I would leave first, and this time, they would never see me coming. I relisted the house under my own name, an invisible hand guiding the sale. Cash buyer only. A young couple appeared almost instantly with no contingencies. 11 days later, the sale closed. I stood in the empty living room on a folding chair, eating a peanut butter sandwich off a paper plate, and whispered to the walls, "This is the last time." The echo of my voice in the empty room felt like a final, sad goodbye. The next morning, I went to the bank. I closed every joint account they had ever touched. I drained the balances and opened a new account under a new name, Adeline Cole, a variation of my grandmother's maiden name. It felt strange signing those papers, like slipping into an unfamiliar coat that still fit just right. The bank teller, a young woman with a polite smile, never looked twice. I packed only what mattered, a small, sad collection of a life reduced to its essence. My husband Arthur's old watch, a bundle of photographs from before the betrayal, and a box of childhood drawings Charlotte and Ethan once made when they still loved me. The rest, the furniture, the dishes, the curtains, was junk now. Scraps of a life that had been stolen from me long before I had left. Before I walked out the door for the last time, I wrote 2 short notes, one for each child. I didn't write an accusation or a plea for understanding, just a final, brutal truth. I wrote 10 words. "Thank you for teaching me who you really are." I left them on the kitchen counter, next to the realtor's business card. A final, physical reminder of their failure. At sunrise, I slipped my belongings into the trunk of my dusty Corolla. No one pays attention to a silver car with peeling paint, and that was exactly the point. I drove north without a GPS, without a plan, the highway opening like a vein before me. By dusk, I crossed into Arkansas and pulled into a town so small it barely warranted a name on the map. The sign read, "Welcome to Fairhaven, a place to rest." I took it as permission. I paid cash for a trailer behind a hardware store. The landlord, a wiry man named Jim, asked only 2 questions. "Do you smoke, and cash, or check?" I told him no, and cash. That was enough. That night, lying on a thin mattress with my boxes stacked like barricades, I listened to the crickets outside and waited for the fear to come. Instead, I felt something I hadn't in years: relief. For the first time since my heart had stopped, I could breathe without wondering who was waiting to bury me. In Fairhaven, I became someone new. A ghost in a small town. Adeline Cole, retired librarian from Roanoke, Virginia. Widowed, childless, looking for peace. It was a story simple enough to remember, and in a town of 6,000 people, no one bothered to question it. People assume you are hiding from something when you show up alone. But in a small place like that, they respect the silence. I started volunteering twice a week at the library, shelving books and repairing bindings. The smell of paper and dust felt like home in a way my own house never had. Soon the staff began to smile when they saw me, and children wandered over because I remembered their names. They didn't see Beatrice Croft, the abandoned mother. They saw Adeline, the kind librarian. That was how I met Lena. She worked nights at the diner across from the library, a single mother with tired eyes and a quick laugh. Her son, Sammy, only 8, trailed behind her after school, clutching dog-eared comic books. He was a quiet, earnest boy, with a shock of brown hair that always fell in his eyes. The first time he called me Grandma Adeline, my throat tightened. It was a lie, a word that belonged to a different life, but I didn't correct him. He wanted nothing from me but a little attention, and that felt like a gift. Days slipped into a rhythm. Mornings at the library, afternoons helping Sammy with his homework, evenings sharing a coffee with Lena. I began to keep a small notebook under my pillow, writing down every detail of my new identity. I wrote and rewrote my backstory, a new mythology for my life, so I would never forget the lies. No children, no San Antonio, no Charlotte, no Ethan, just Adeline. And for a time, it worked. My lungs filled with clean air. My chest no longer felt like a cracked shell. The laughter of a boy who wanted nothing from me but attention was enough to stitch me back together. The constant, low hum of betrayal that had followed me since the hospital finally began to fade. I spent my days reading, working, and building a quiet, simple life that was mine alone. My world had shrunk, but it had also become richer, more vibrant. I had traded a mansion and a life of betrayal for a small trailer, and the unconditional love of a boy who saw me as family, and the easy friendship of a woman who just wanted to share a cup of coffee. I had chosen my family. I had chosen my home, and I was content. The world still spun with stories about me, about a ghost who had vanished. But here in this quiet town, I wasn't a headline. I wasn't Beatrice Croft, the abandoned mother. I wasn't a scandal or a ghost. I was simply Adeline, and that was enough. Then one evening in July, everything shifted. It was Sammy's 9th birthday. Lena rented the back room of the VFW hall, stringing paper streamers and setting out mismatched cupcakes. I sat beside him while he opened gifts, clapping when he tore through the wrapping paper, smiling when he leaned against me for a hug. One of the other moms, blonde and eager with her phone, filmed the whole thing. Just a 30-second clip of Sammy unwrapping a toy car while I helped him read the card. She uploaded it to her Instagram, a public account for all her friends. Just another cheerful clip of a child's birthday. 3 days later, Lena burst into the library, phone in hand, face pale. "Adeline," she whispered, her voice a thin thread of fear. "You need to see this." The video had been reposted on a parenting blog, then cross-shared to TikTok. Someone, a faceless stranger on the internet, matched my face to old news clippings from San Antonio. The caption was a digital screen. "Found her. Grandma Ghost is alive in Fairhaven. She changed her name. She's building a new family." My stomach dropped. The quiet life I had built, the carefully constructed fiction I lived in, cracked wide open. By morning, the video had passed 1 million views. Comments poured in. Some praised me as a legend, a woman who took back her life. "That's a real hero. She's a queen." Others accused me of cruelty, of abandoning my family. How could a mother do that? "She's a monster." My face was everywhere again, plastered across forums, podcasts, TikTok duets. I sat at the kitchen table in my trailer, notebook open, writing and rewriting my cover story, as if that would keep it safe. Adeline Cole, retired librarian, widowed, no children. The lies suddenly felt paper thin. A cruel joke. Lena tried to reassure me. "People online forget in a week, Adeline. It will blow over." But I had lived long enough to know better. If the world saw me, then so did Charlotte and Ethan. 2 days later, I saw it. A silver Toyota with Texas plates creeping past the library parking lot. It circled twice, then slid into a space too carefully, like a shark testing shallow water. My chest tightened, a familiar feeling of dread rising. The driver's door opened. Charlotte stepped out. Jeans, a cardigan, a paper coffee cup in her hand. She looked older, smaller, as if shame had eaten away the shine she once wore so proudly. She stood near the entrance, scanning the sidewalk until her eyes found me. I froze behind the stacks, watching her through the glass door. A ghost from my old life. A phantom I thought I had buried. 5 minutes passed before I stepped outside. My hands shook, but I kept my shoulders straight. She stared, lips parting, as if confirming I was real. Then her voice cracked on one word. Mom. For a moment, an old reflex stirred in me. The urge to comfort, to soften, to tell her everything was okay. But it vanished as quickly as it came. I was no longer that woman. The woman who had been betrayed, abandoned, and left to die. Please don't walk away, she whispered, her voice a thin plea. I looked her dead in the eye. I already held my funeral. You just weren't there. The words struck harder than a slap. Charlotte flinched, gripping her coffee cup like it might anchor her. We didn't know, she said, her voice trembling. We thought you were fine. We thought. I laughed. It was a loud, bitter, ugly sound that startled even me. You left me alone in a hospital bed. You tried to sell my house while I was still breathing. Don't you dare say you didn't know. Tears slid down her face, silent and raw. She looked nothing like the daughter I raised, more like a stranger in my child's skin. I was scared, she murmured. Scared to watch you get weak. Scared to be alone. You were scared to lose your inheritance. I corrected, my voice cold and hard. You made mistakes. You made choices. And now, I'm making mine. She stepped closer, her hand half raised as if reaching for me. I didn't move. I was a statue of ice, a woman forged in fire and betrayal. I'm not coming back, Charlotte. I found a new life, one that doesn't require pretending we were ever okay. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The silence between us was heavier than the years we had lost. I turned and walked away. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough for her to know this was not a performance. It was closure. It was 3 weeks before I heard from Ethan. Not a call, not a knock on the door, but a letter slipped through the library's return slot. The envelope had my new name, Adeline, in his familiar, shaky handwriting. Inside was a single folded sheet. At the top, in shaky ink, was my own writing. I froze. It was the note I had scrawled in the ICU when I thought I was dying. I had begged then, if I don't wake up, please forgive me. If I do, please come. I am scared. Ethan had written in the margins, his words slanted and desperate. We didn't know how bad it was. I thought Charlotte would go. I thought you'd understand. I am so sorry, Mom. For 2 nights, I let it sit on my kitchen table, unopened again, as if staring at it could erase the ache. Then, against my better judgment, I answered his email. 1 visit, no cameras, no excuses. Bring the letter. We met at the cemetery on the edge of town, a place where truth felt heavier because the ground itself held people who could no longer lie. I sat on a bench near my husband Arthur's headstone and watched my son walk toward me, clutching a tote bag like it could shield him. For a moment, he looked like the boy he once was, shuffling in the doorway of his first-grade classroom, nervous and wide-eyed. But when he sat down a few feet away, I saw the man who had betrayed me. He handed me the envelope without a word. I opened it, scanning the shaky margins again. The words were a pathetic, flimsy excuse for a betrayal that had nearly killed me. Ethan finally spoke, his voice raw. I didn't know how to deal with watching you get weak, I thought. I thought if we moved fast, it would be easier. For everyone. He was still trying to rationalize, to justify his actions. I turned to him, my throat tightening. I didn't need you to be strong, Ethan. I needed you to show up, to be my son. I needed you to hold my hand while I fought for my life. His face crumpled, tears falling fast. You think I don't hate myself for it? You think I sleep? I think you sleep better than I did, I replied, the words a hammer blow, wondering why my own children couldn't hold my hand while I fought for breath. Silence pressed down between us, heavier than the stone markers and all around. Can I come back? Can we try again? His voice cracked like a boy's. I shook my head slowly, a single, definitive movement. That part of me, Ethan, you already buried, and this time I chose the funeral. He reached toward me for a hug, but I stepped back, not harsh, just final. When I walked away, I didn't look over my shoulder. His sobs echoed through the cemetery, but they were not mine to carry anymore. The morning after the cemetery meeting, I sat at the little table in my trailer with a fresh sheet of notebook paper. The same notebook I had once used to track passwords. The same one where I kept the details of the identity I had built. At the top of the page, I wrote 2 words. You did it. I let the pen hover for a moment before continuing. You got out. I listed everything I had left behind. A house that no longer felt like home. A name that had become a burden. Children who treated me like furniture to be cleared away. And then I listed what I had gained. Quiet mornings. Honest conversations. The laughter of a child who loved me without condition. A friend who saw me as more than a bank account or a burden. When I finished, I folded the paper and slid it into a shoebox under the bed next to Sammy's drawings, and the only photograph I had kept of Charlotte and Ethan from long ago, back when they still believed I could do anything. I closed the box, not with anger, but with acceptance. That afternoon, Lena asked if I could help Sammy trim the hedges in front of their porch. I agreed, grateful for the distraction. The sun was warm on my shoulders, the clippers steady in my hands. When Sammy ran up to me with a chipped seashell he had found by the creek, he grinned and shouted, "Grandma Adeline, look what I found!" I smiled without hesitation. Perfect. Let's go build something with it. We spent an hour stacking shells in the dirt, laughing when they tumbled, starting over again and again. For the first time in years, I felt whole without having to be healed. That evening, as the light faded, I sat on Lena's porch and watched Sammy chase fireflies. Lena leaned against the railing and asked softly, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving?" I thought about the hospital monitor flatlining, about the note on the bedside table, about the real estate flyer that had turned my home into a commodity, about the cold, broken faces of my children. "No," I said. "I regret staying as long as I did." She nodded, and we let the silence stretch, comfortable and true. The world still spun with stories about me. Online, strangers debated whether I was a villain or a hero. Was I a ghost or a legend? But here in this quiet town, I wasn't a headline. I wasn't Beatrice Croft, abandoned mother. I wasn't a scandal or a ghost. I was simply Adeline. And that was enough. The lesson I carry is simple. Family is not the blood that runs through your veins, but the ones who show up when you are weak. It is the hand that steadies you when you stumble, the voice that answers when you call. And sometimes it is the family you choose, not the one that was chosen for you.